revealed the incredible skill that transformed a dying ranch, more amazing than a Christmas bride. Caleb Johnson stood at the edge of what was left of Whispering Pines Ranch, the sprawling Montana skies a sharp contrast to the storm brewing in his chest. Over the years, he had prided himself on keeping the land that his family had nurtured through seasons of drought and rain. But now, with the bank threatening foreclosure and his father bedridden with advanced health issues, the weight of the Johnson legacy felt like a lead anchor dragging him down. He had always wanted to be proud of his work, to earn the respect of his peers, and yet here he was, overwhelmed with doubt. As he gazed at the worn barn, memories flooded back. His father explaining the intricacies of cattle breeding, the scent of fresh hay mingling with the crisp air, the laughter of family gatherings now marred by the reality of impending loss. Caleb clenched his fists. Was it the tradition he cherished that now stood in the way of survival? In the quiet of the attic, as he sifted through old boxes, something caught his eye, a sturdy leather-bound journal. It belonged to his late grandfather, a man celebrated for pioneering sustainable ranching techniques that melded tradition with modern thinking. Flipping through the yellowed pages ignited a flicker of hope, but it also spurred a bitter internal conflict within him. Embracing innovation felt like a betrayal to the very name he fought to uphold. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The following week, he met Margaret, a sharp-witted retired agricultural scientist, in a dingy coffee shop that smelled of burnt coffee and desperation. Her enthusiasm contrasted starkly with Caleb's unease. As they mapped out an innovative approach, a part of him craved the methodical security of traditions etched into his soul. But the looming threat of failure forced him to entertain ideas that felt like an unsettling leap into the unknown. Infused with determination to remedy the skepticism of local ranchers, led by his childhood rival Jake, Caleb felt a relentless pressure building. How could he face his peers with radical ideas that made their traditions appear outdated? As crippling insecurity gripped him, he remembered the jeers from years past, each taunt sharp as barbed wire. Every moment spent in planning was shadowed by self-doubt and fear of embarrassment. Then came a severe storm that rocked Whispering Pines Ranch, casting aside the carefully erected plans they had built over the past months. As the torrential rains battered the land, Caleb's heart sank. Hope washed away with the flooding waters. He stood in the mud, feeling the full weight of his family's legacy crushing him beneath its history. How could he present his vision when the ranch itself seemed on the brink of collapse? Standing before the townsfolk at the county fair, a churning anxiety clawed at him, trapping him between his fears and the desire to forge a new path. This moment was pivotal, a chance to reclaim not just his family's ranch, but to finally define what it meant to be a Johnson. As murmurs and skeptical glances enveloped him like the storm clouds he had just battled, Caleb could feel the pressure closing in. The crowd held their breath, and for a split second, he questioned if he could unveil the plan that bridged generations. Would his courage to speak up save everything, or would it precipitate the very disaster he aimed to avoid? He stood there, trembling on the precipice, still wrestling with the unresolved conflict swirling inside him, feeling impossibly small beneath the weight of expectations. Caleb's throat felt dry as he gripped the edges of the rickety podium, the old wood splintering against his palms like the tempest of thoughts racing through his mind. He could feel the weight of 100 eyes focused on him, the palpable skepticism practically crackling in the air. With each breath, the fear of failure intertwined deeper into his resolve. What if they rejected him? What if he failed them, failed his family? As he stood there, the words of his grandfather echoed in his head, advice that had always been handed down like a treasured heirloom. Progress isn't a betrayal, Caleb. It's an evolution, he remembered. From the journal, he had learned of methods that had preserved the land while ensuring its productivity, a delicate balance of old and new that could provide a pathway to salvation. But standing before the townsfolk, knowing Jake was in the crowd, the pressure seemed unbearable. Caleb! A voice cut through the tension, a jarring reminder of his childhood rivalry. Jake sauntered forward, his confidence radiating from him like the sunbeams piercing through dark clouds. What exactly is this plan you keep mumbling about? Let's hear it. The challenge hung in the air, a low rumble of laughter from the back that wrung Caleb's stomach tighter. There was a chaotic buzz inside his head, each voice clamoring louder than the last, but beneath it all lay a beating heart of conviction. This was not merely about saving the ranch anymore, it was about reclaiming his identity. Swallowing hard, Caleb took a step forward. He caught a glimpse of Margaret in the crowd, her nod of encouragement flickering like a beacon in the storm of his doubts. "Thank you for asking, Jake," Caleb began, his voice steadier than he felt. "What I'm proposing may seem unconventional, but Whispering Pines has always been about more than just cattle. It's about our land, our heritage. We have the chance to transform how we work by utilizing sustainable practices." As he spoke, the memory of the journal propelled him, fueling his confidence. He outlined his vision. Rotating pastures to restore the soil, organic fertilizers to rejuvenate their crops, and diversifying their livestock to lessen risk. Each point was anchored in history, yet tethered firmly to the new. Surprisingly, he found a rhythm, the words spilling easily as he illustrated how these methods could nurture both the land and their community heritage. Growing excitement seeped into his delivery as he discovered strength within himself he never knew existed. However, the undercurrent of doubt resurfaced when Jake cut in again, a smirk plastered on his face. "Sounds like you're ready to throw tradition out the window, Caleb. What makes you think the land will even support these changes?" The cynicism threatened to sap his newfound energy, but it also offered a challenge, a test to confront directly. "What makes you think our current methods are sustainable, Jake?" Caleb replied, meeting his gaze head-on. "The struggle we face isn't because of our heritage, it's the inflexibility of clinging to outdated practices. The land is dying, and so are we if we don't adapt." The crowd shifted, murmurs weaving through them. Some of the ranchers leaned in, nodding, while others remained rooted in their skepticism. Then Caleb caught sight of an unexpected ally, his mother among the listeners. Her face reflecting disbelief and pride intertwined. It was a reminder that his fight was not only for the ranch, but for the future he envisioned, not just for himself, but for her and his father as well. As he finished, a mix of applause and skeptical glances swept the gathering. He could feel the divide among the crowd. Some were intrigued, while others were skeptical. Caleb's heart raced for what came next. Had he driven the first nail into the coffin of his family's legacy, or had he instilled the seeds of hope? The silence that followed felt both deafening and electrifying. He had stepped beyond the threshold of tradition and into a battle for belief. The fight was far from over. Would he rally the townsfolk, or would he find himself standing alone against the tide of history? Moments ticked by like clockwork, and in that suspended breath of anticipation, Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. What would be the cost of his conviction? In the silence, the echoes of his doubts screamed louder than ever. The true test awaited just beyond the uncertain horizon of change. The atmosphere buzzed with a strange concoction of hope and apprehension. Caleb could feel the weight of uncertainty rest heavily on his shoulders. He had stepped back from the podium, but the echoes of his words reverberated in his ears, calling him to action. What would he do next? He could almost sense a fracture in the ground beneath his feet, mirroring the divide among the townsfolk. He wandered to the periphery of the gathering, seeking refuge from the onslaught of mixed reactions. The fading applause still lingered in the air. Caleb knotted his fingers together, remembering the rhythm of his speech and the fleeting moments of confidence. But doubt slithered back into his mind. Had he truly made an impact, or was he just deluding himself? In a world steeped in tradition, he felt like a sacrificial lamb set against the forces of inertia. His mother approached him, her brow furrowed with concern mixed with pride. "You did well, Caleb," she murmured, her voice soaked in warmth. "But change is hard for them, you know." "Mom, what if they reject all of this? What if they decide it's too far-fetched?" Caleb's voice wavered as he unfurled his uncertainty. "They will come to understand, given time," she assured him. "You're not just fighting for the ranch, you're fighting for their futures too." Her words sparked a flicker of resolve in him. As he glanced back at the crowd, he recognized the varying expressions etched on familiar faces: curiosity, skepticism, hope, and despair. If he could find a way to connect with them, he might stand a chance of bridging their fractured beliefs. Unconsciously, he found himself walking toward Jake, who stood at the edge, still radiating skepticism. Caleb remembered the fierce rivalry from their youth, but in the present moment, he wouldn't shy away from a confrontation. Perhaps Jake's intense nature could be a catalyst for greater discussion. "Jake!" Caleb called out, buoyed by a sudden surge of purpose. "Can we talk? I want to understand your concerns, not just here, but moving forward." Jake's brow momentarily lifted in surprise before settling back into a studious frown. "And what's there to talk about? You're tossing the family legacy aside, Caleb. Who says your ideas are even feasible?" "I think it's feasible if we work together," Caleb replied, surprised at his own conviction. "You want to ensure our futures, right? So let's come up with a plan together. You have experience. Help me see where I'm wrong." For a moment, Caleb saw something shift in Jake's demeanor, a crack in the confident facade, perhaps a recognition of their shared struggles. "Fine," Jake replied cautiously, "but I'm going to hold you accountable if this falls through." Caleb nodded, a sense of unity blossoming. "Accountability is key," he stated firmly. "I'm willing to work for this. I need you to be my challenge. I want to learn from you, just as you can learn from these ideas." As they spoke, Caleb felt a flicker of possibility, a way to transform his singular vision into a collective strategy. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about enlisting the strengths and fears of others to frame a cohesive narrative for change. The two exchanged ideas, each point given and taken, where Caleb opened up about techniques from the journal and addressed Jake's concerns about loss. The conversation faltered and flowed, but one thing became clear. Caleb's eagerness to engage with dissent made him a counterpoint to the swirling doubts. But deep inside, Caleb felt a new problem emerging. It wasn't merely about rallying the ranchers, but also about bolstering his own faith in this evolving vision. He was still threading through a maze of hesitations, and Jake was not fully on board yet. His challenge was just beginning. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the field, as if the earth itself mirrored his thoughts. Would Jake's support come to fruition, or would he ultimately stand alone in his pursuit of a vision? Caleb's heart pounded with renewed determination. Whatever lay ahead would require more than just words. It demanded direct action. He had to solidify his ideas into tangible projects, earn the trust he craved, and not lose sight of why he had ignited this battle. As he parted ways with Jake that evening, the question lingered. How far was he willing to go to ignite this change, and what sacrifices would he ultimately have to make to fulfill his vision? The burning desire to reclaim the ranch coalesced with the looming specter of doubt. Somewhere in the distance, a storm brewed, mirroring the internal tumult within him. What he didn't yet know was that one key element, an unexpected revelation, was waiting just around the corner, poised to reshape his entire perspective. Caleb's mind raced as he stepped away from the remnants of the crowd. He felt as if he were caught in a dynamic whirlpool of expectations and fear. The conversations with Jake had reignited a spark, but with it came the nagging realization that words alone wouldn't change anything. Ideas without execution were just dreams, and he no longer wanted to linger in a state of uncertainty. He wandered back toward the ranch, his sanctuary. The familiar sense of hay and earth mingled with the twilight, grounding him but also fueling his fears. His own legacy loomed large. What kind of rancher would he be if he failed to cultivate a future for it? Unclenching his fists, he squinted against the fading sunlight, pondering the many voices that echoed in his mind, each offering a different piece of advice or admonition. Once inside the dimly lit barn, he allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. He stared at the worn tools and bustling livestock, memories of hard work coalescing with visions of innovation. He realized embracing change didn't mean letting go of tradition entirely. It was about evolving with it, integrating what was inherently valuable with new insights that could build a more sustainable future. With visceral clarity, Caleb recalled the journal techniques he had studied but barely approached. It was time to immerse himself fully in them, to transform the anxiety of uncertainty into a strategic plan. He knew he had to outline his vision more clearly, one that encompassed his goals but also addressed the fears and concerns of others, especially Jake's. He spread the journal across a wooden table, flipping to dog-eared pages filled with sketches and insufficient drafts. Each illustration seemed to hold a part of him, a blueprint for potential. He set to work, drafts swiftly coalescing into coherent strategies. Alternative farming practices, mentorship initiatives, and community gatherings focused on education and adaptation. For every fear he unearthed, he specifically crafted a corresponding measure. Days passed, and Caleb solidified his plan, but doubt still threatened to seep back in. He needed concrete evidence to bolster his assertions, numbers, trends, success stories from similar ranches. As twilight fell again over the fields, he spent long hours poring over reports from agricultural organizations, tech journals, and environmental case studies. Each revelation fueled his burgeoning confidence. It wasn't mere idealism, it was grounded in reality. Caleb's heart raced as he formulated what felt like a transformative approach. The culmination of his ideas, lessons learned, and respect for tradition all blended into a cohesive directive. Yet each revelation brought forth the weight of responsibility. What if he stumbled into an abyss of failure? The swish of the barn doors drew his attention. It was Jake, his expression betraying an unexpected vulnerability. "I read your proposals." The admission carried an edge of uncertainty, but also a note of intrigue. "It's ambitious. Some of it even makes sense." Caleb felt a swell of hope surge amidst his fears. "You don't just think it's wild, then? We could discuss the details, refine the ideas." "There's potential, but potential isn't enough." Jake's scrutiny was piercing. "You can't paint over objections. People want answers, not grand illusions. Show how this affects their way of life. Show me how it works practically." Caleb's pulse quickened. He could see the opening he needed. "Help me frame the proposals," he asserted, feeling a tide of motivation sharpen within him. "We can go through this together, make sure it's realistic. They trust you, Jake. If you vouch for some of these ideas, it will carry weight." An unexpected silence enveloped them as Jake absorbed the gravity of Caleb's offer. There was a shift in the air, a dawning realization that perhaps they could channel their shared history into something constructive. Trust was built slowly, yet here lay an opportunity to entwine their strengths. Before leaving, Jake nodded curtly. "Let's give it a week. I'll back you, but this means laying everything on the line. Our families deserve answers, not just hope." As Caleb watched him depart, excitement and trepidation churned in his chest. There was immeasurable gratitude, but also the question of whether he could sustain this enthusiasm in the face of looming obstacles. He would need to prepare not just for Jake's skepticism, but for the broader challenge of winning over their ranch community. But tonight, the stakes felt elevated. He was on the brink of a transformation, one that could reshape the foundation of everything he had known. The imminent test loomed larger, demanding resolute action, but the question lanced through his thoughts. Could he really execute this intricate plan without faltering at the crucial moment? The sun rose over the horizon, casting its warm rays across the sprawling ranch that had always been Caleb's world. Today felt pivotal, a palpable shift in the air, as if the landscape itself was holding its breath alongside him. With determination coursing through his veins, he stepped out with renewed purpose. Each stride felt like a declaration, a promise to himself and to the legacy he wished to uphold. Yet, the weight of expectation loomed heavier than ever. He could still hear Jake's voice reverberating in his mind. "Potential isn't enough." Discomfort settled in his stomach, reminding him that mere ambition would not suffice. It was the execution that mattered. He had to transform that ambition into something tangible, something that could resonate in the hearts and minds of the ranch community. At the barn, with the air thick with the scent of hay and livestock, Caleb employed every detail from his drafts that had once felt disjointed. The logical sequences of his plan began to unfold like an intricate tapestry. He reminded himself that tradition interwoven with innovation could lay a foundation steeped in resilience, but it required a robust framework to support his vision. He gathered the tools for the day, determined to spend the morning executing the first of his plans, a workshop on alternative farming practices. He had always admired how agriculture wrapped around itself, and now it was time to demonstrate that not only could they sustain their livelihoods, but they could thrive within evolving paradigms. This was not merely a presentation, this was a potential catalyst for revolutionizing their understanding of ranching. As Caleb started preparing the materials, lingering self-doubt nipped at the edges of his confidence. What if the ranchers dismissed his efforts, unwilling to explore unfamiliar terrain? He inhaled deeply, steeling himself against that anxiety. Instead of a safety net, he would utilize his uncertainty as fuel. He began laying out pamphlets, facts pulled from reports and statistics that demonstrated the efficacy of new techniques, catering to the ranchers' traditional instincts by showing how these methods honored their roots while promoting sustainability. By lunchtime, he was exhausted but invigorated. The small group he had gathered listened intently, absorbing the ideas cascading from him as he illustrated practical steps interwoven with empirical evidence. A few skeptical faces remained, but he saw intrigue blossom as he articulated how adapting would mitigate long-term vulnerabilities, emphasizing that survival depended on their ability to pivot. Encouraged by the cautious nods, Caleb took a risk. He invited them to articulate their concerns. One rancher, John, rose hesitantly and challenged, "But what if these practices fail us?" It was a genuine query, shrouded in honest fear. Caleb recognized that while the question came from a place of skepticism, it also bore an undercurrent of hope, a desire for growth without losing the support of their traditions. In response, Caleb leaned in. "What if we fail? The fear of failure holds many back from even trying. But what if every failure leads us to a new discovery, a new way to thrive? Each year produces challenges, but embracing change can empower us to weather any storm that comes our way. Let's learn together, iterate, and adapt." He could feel a shift in the room. As they processed his words, self-doubt retreated, making space for an emerging confidence. Together, they could face the unknown. When they left, Caleb was surprised by a sense of camaraderie in the air. He'd planted seeds of change, and perhaps they would take root in time. Later that evening, while playing back the day in his mind, he picked up the journal again. As he turned pages filled with aspirations, a new entry surged forth like a wildfire, igniting his passion further. An entire section dedicated to key metrics and outcomes that he would need to quantify their success. This would be the pivotal evidence to quench the fears still residing in skeptical hearts. A knock at the door startled him out of his reverie. Jake stood there with curiosity etched on his face. "I heard the workshop went better than expected." There was a hint of admiration behind the assessment that made Caleb's heart race. "Let's sit down," Caleb proposed, excitement bubbling within him. "We need to refine the next steps. I want to make this a reality." As Jake stepped inside, Caleb's mind shifted gears. The moment felt critical. If they pooled their strengths and insights, they could break down the last barriers. Yet doubt still lingered about their effectiveness, and the magnitude of their endeavor weighed heavily. The pressure mounted, presenting an undeniable question. Were they prepared to face the inevitable backlash of such an ambitious transformation? With the stakes escalating, the next chapter of their journey loomed ominously before them. Caleb sat down across from Jake, the weight of their ambitions pressing down on him like a storm cloud. The air felt charged with anticipation, and every moment of silence seemed to amplify his internal struggle. He had carved out a vision from the anxiety that often gripped him, but now the vision felt almost like a phantom, slipping through his fingers as doubts resurfaced. "All right," Jake said, his voice steady yet probing. "What's your next move? We need clarity here." Caleb could sense the unspoken challenge in his friend's tone. It was a call to action, a push to shape not just a future for the ranch, but for himself. Caleb leaned back, crossing his arms defensively. "We can expand the workshop series, maybe even include hands-on demonstrations. But I want to go deeper. I know they're hesitant about significant changes, and I need to show them tangible results." Jake nodded, his brow furrowing as if weighing Caleb's words. "Are you ready for that, though? A lot of ranchers might see this as a personal attack on their way of life." The challenge hung between them, palpable. Caleb felt the tight knot in his stomach as he considered the stakes. His heart raced, not just with nervousness but with the urgency of realizing his aspirations. He replied cautiously, "I think it's time for a more radical approach. If I can help them see the potential in innovation without feeling attacked, then maybe they'll let down their guards." Searching Jake's face, he saw mingled skepticism and respect. "You sure about this? You're going to need a plan that doesn't just cover the theory, but lays out practical, demonstrable results. That might mean risking embarrassment if it doesn't pan out." Caleb met Jake's gaze, and in that moment, something inside him shifted. "I can't ignore what's at stake. Being stuck in comfortable stagnation is a form of failure too." This realization surged through him, igniting a determination he had nearly lost. The fear of embarrassment seemed trivial compared to what could happen if he didn't push forward. Feeling suddenly invigorated, he stood up and crossed the room, picking up the pamphlets he had prepared earlier. "Let's set measurable goals for these workshops. The success criteria will be the key metrics I need to present later. Each workshop will not only cover concepts, but also include a feedback loop, a way for them to see their progress." Jake's expression shifted. Curiosity was piqued. "A feedback loop? How do you envision that working?" Caleb smiled, already hatching a plan. "By inviting each rancher to share their results after trying new techniques. This will create ownership of their own experiences. If they can see their friends succeeding, it might erase some of that skepticism. We're all in this together after all." He could hear the resonance of his own words, invigorating not only Jake, but himself. This was about weaving together their shared experiences, as opposed to imposing change. Each small win would be a building block toward greater acceptance. But then it hit him, the looming question and the reality of his fears. What if the feedback turned against him? What if the experiment failed and they all blamed him and rejected the entire process? "Caleb," Jake's voice broke through, grounding him. "You're going to need a backup plan, something to buffer any backlash if this goes sideways." Caleb felt another surge of uncertainty, a new wave of anxiety pressing in. He knew Jake was right. Failure didn't just affect him, it would affect the entire ranch. But would avoidance be the answer, or merely an invitation for regret later? He silently wrestled with the idea, realizing that by not proposing bold ideas, he was already failing them. "I'll have backup strategies, document everything and track outcomes effectively," Caleb finally replied, trying to solidify the decision in his mind. "But I won't shy away from the risk either. It's time they understand that innovation can coexist with tradition." After brainstorming further steps together, an unexpected sense of camaraderie sparked in the room, and for the first time they began to lay down concrete plans. Yet the fabric of his resolve still felt fragile, threatened by the unknowns ahead. As the conversation began to wind down, a shadow of fear whispered in Caleb's mind. What if those very traditions he sought to honor turned against him? He was about to step into a battleground of old versus new, and within that conflict, a realization washed over him. Perhaps he would discover something essential about himself, a skill or understanding he had yet to unveil. Would this endeavor reveal not only the rancher's potential, but his own as well? Caleb felt a shift within him as he considered the possibilities, every heartbeat echoing the notion that he was standing on the cusp of personal transformation. It didn't take long for that thought to take root, pushing aside doubt and feeding a growing excitement. He would embrace the fear, the uncertainty, the risk, all of it on this unfamiliar journey. The tension mounted as he voiced the question that had begun to haunt him. "Are we ready to face the consequences of this ambitious path, Jake? Because the momentum is building, and there's no turning back now." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, a fitting sound for what lay ahead. Caleb stood at the workshop door, heart pounding in sync with the thunder that echoed in the sky. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, mirroring the tension coiling in his stomach. Today was critical. The ranchers had arrived, their faces a blend of curiosity and skepticism that left him unsettled. He checked his presentation materials again. Each page a promise of change lay between those worn-out covers. "You're ready for this, Caleb. You have to be," he muttered under his breath, forcing a sense of calm as he took a deep breath. He reminded himself that he was not just presenting ideas, he was opening a door to possibilities. He glanced at the crowd gathered under the sun-bleached awning, each face reflecting years of inherited hesitance. As he began his presentation, Caleb could feel the weight of their gazes, a tangible reminder of the expectations that surrounded him. He laid out the vision he had crafted, projecting slides that captured innovative techniques intermingled with familiar ranching traditions. He described the feedback loop and how it empowered each rancher to track their own successes. Still, dread licked at the edges of his confidence. What if they dismissed it all? What if the trust he sought to build was crushed beneath their fear of change? Halfway through, he paused, the silence profound. A hand shot up, one that belonged to Old Man Harrell, a pillar of resistance in the ranching community. "What makes you think we've got time for your experiments? We've been doing this our way for decades." The challenge felt like a strike to his core. The panic surged within him, doubt clawed at his throat, threatening to overpower his resolve. Yet the storm brewing outside and the tension growing in the room ignited a fierceness within him that he hadn't anticipated. "Because it matters, sir," Caleb replied, an intensity in his voice that surprised even him. "Your way has worked, but the world is changing. It's not about abandoning tradition, it's about enhancing it. Together we can adapt without losing what makes our ranches special." A murmur rippled through the audience. Maybe he had touched a nerve. A younger rancher, someone he had seen struggling under his father's shadow, chimed in. "What if we try one of these ideas, Caleb? Just a small experiment?" The tide shifted slightly. Encouragement mingled with apprehension, and before he knew it, a few more ranchers voiced their interest. It was a beautiful thing, this friendly competition he had hoped to inspire. He felt the breakthrough then. He was not just battling their tradition, but awakening something dormant within their understanding, a possibility of growth. He had to structure this newfound momentum. As he detailed how they could start small, with easy steps towards more efficient practices, he realized he was at a crossroads. His own growth lay in surrendering his need for control, showing rather than telling. Success wouldn't just come from his ideas, but from their experiences and transformations together. Caleb addressed a slew of questions that began flooding from all sides, from practical concerns to emotional hesitations. He listened, really listened, as delegates of doubt spoke their truths, revealing more about his community's fears than he had anticipated. He tackled each one with care, connecting their sentiments to the broad narrative of evolution, building trust slowly. By the end of the session, a flicker of excitement sparked in those hesitant eyes, a nascent hope kindled by awareness that maybe, just maybe, they could blend the old with the new. The atmosphere had shifted, though it still felt precarious. Caleb wished he had noticed earlier just how important it was to sway opinions slowly. As the ranchers filed out, Caleb lingered, mentally tallying the waves of emotion that had ebbed and flowed throughout the day. He could still hear Old Man Harrell's voice in his head, and the doubt that lingered in the creases of his forehead. The resounding questions echoed just as loud. Had he truly changed any minds? It was easy to dream of transformation, but the real challenge lay in nurturing that small flame into a raging fire. Later that evening, Caleb found himself wandering the fields, the thunder now a distant hum. He considered the conversations which had unfolded. Every word exchanged stirred something deeper. He recognized a possibility, the reawakening of his passion for not just the ranch, but his role within this fragile ecosystem of tradition and change. He had not just guided them toward the future, he was re-establishing his connection to his roots. Suddenly he caught sight of his reflection in the murky puddles lining the path, determined, yet still grappling with doubts. The journey ahead promised potential, but was layered with risks he couldn't shake. What if he failed to bridge the gap? What if the storm outside wasn't the only tumult threatening to revisit him? As Caleb stood there, breathing in the dampness of the evening air, a thought solidified in his mind. It was time to confront the reality that challenged him internally, to face the fears that clung to the edges of his resolve. And while the potential of his vision unfolded day by day, one nagging question began to pulse at the forefront of his consciousness. Would he ultimately remain overshadowed by the very traditions he sought to preserve? Or was he about to step into a leadership role that could redefine everything for the ranch and himself? That night, as the wind whispered stories of resilience, Caleb braced himself for the next day. The moment had come to face the rancher's fears, and perhaps his own. Dawn broke with a silver light streaking across the fields, casting evocative shadows that danced with the wind's songs. Caleb woke with a jolt, tension tightening his muscles like a coiled spring. The whispers of his thoughts from the previous night still lingered in his mind, haunting yet invigorating. Today was uncharted territory, a reckoning he had long awaited. As he prepared breakfast, his hands moved through motions familiar, yet charged with uncertainty. The routine felt different. Every slice of bread and crack of eggs carried the weight of impending decisions. Would today mark a turning point, or would he squander the delicate progress he had made? His mind drifted back to the questions raised by the ranchers. Each inquiry had been a puzzle piece, revealing layers of skepticism and fear interwoven within their collective psyche. Caleb had understood that they were not just resisting change, they were grappling with the risks that came along with it. He inhaled deeply. What if he could convert that uncertainty into curiosity? After breakfast, he gathered his ideas and stepped outside. The emerald fields were still glistening with dew as the sun climbed higher, illuminating the path ahead. He had decided to embrace the tension hovering in the air. He would challenge the ranchers again, but this time with more than ideas. He would bring a tangible demonstration of success to the forefront. As the morning wore on, Caleb's mind raced with planning. He revisited the concepts he had briefly shared before, honing them into a concise lineup that they could engage with directly. Each idea needed to feel attainable, requiring action yet promising results. Outside, he spotted the sows from an innovative breeding project he had been experimenting with. They were unexpectedly thriving, a sign of possibility, an opportunity for growth visibly unfolding. He felt an electric pulse as he approached the makeshift pen. These animals were a blend of tradition and modern practices, bred to withstand the shifting climate while maintaining heritage traits. Serving as his proof of concept, these sows could symbolize a bridge between the old and new, the very embodiment of his vision. Caleb spent the next few hours preparing for the rancher's return, setting up the demonstrations outside the workshop. The more he worked, the more confident he felt. This action tethered him to something greater, a hope rooted not only in his ambition, but also in the rancher's shared legacy. As noon approached, he paced near the entrance, heart beating in anticipation. His palms grew clammy as the figures of ranchers began to emerge from the line of trees at the property's edge. Today, he would not merely convince them, he would invite them to participate in their own transformation. Once the crowd gathered, Caleb greeted them warmly, his enthusiasm unfurling in his gesture. "Thank you for coming back. Today, I want to show you something that might help us all see the possibilities we've been discussing." He led them toward the sows, explaining the hybrid techniques and the successes they had produced. His voice rang with conviction, yet he felt the weight of his vulnerability. A single misstep could shatter their fragile trust. Old Man Harrell stood at the back, arms crossed, a familiar frown etching into his brow. Caleb could feel the mounting pressure of his gaze, magnifying every doubt that flickered in his chest. "Experimenting again, are we?" Harrell finally spoke, his tone sharp, drawing attention. "What makes you think your fancy ideas will work on our soil?" "I don't expect to overturn everything in one day, but I believe we're standing at the edge of something extraordinary, an evolution of ranching that can respect our roots while pushing us toward the future." The resolve in Caleb's voice felt solid, reinforced by the life bustling at his feet inside the pen. As he showcased the sow's resilience and productivity, small nods trickled through the crowd. Caleb noticed the stoic expressions beginning to crack. With each passing moment, anticipation hung thick in the air, mixing with their reserved curiosity. Finally, after a few hesitant questions, one of the younger ranchers stepped forward. "Could we try it? Just one litter, one new technique?" The shift was palpable. They were leaning in, embracing the concept. Caleb's heart soared, yet a new wave of anxiety pulsed through him. Could they follow through? What if this moment was merely a flicker of enthusiasm overshadowed by the very traditions they cherished? As this hopeful response echoed within him, a deeper truth pressed against his consciousness. This was not just about the mechanics of ranching. It was about a rekindling of belief, both in himself and in them. Yet even as excitement bubbled inside, he sensed that more challenges awaited. The question now echoed in his mind. If they ventured into this new territory, what obstacles would they face together? Would they have the courage to confront fears, both his and theirs, as they stepped forward into the unknown? Caleb felt a profound certainty ripple through him. He had ignited their curiosity, but he now had to prove that together they could not only innovate but thrive. In this pivotal moment, he understood that their future hinged not solely on ideas, but their shared resolve. As the discussions flourished and excitement took root, he could feel a new storm stirring, this time within himself. Would this burgeoning transformation cement his role as a leader, or would his insecurities reel him back into the shadows of tradition? The real work was just beginning, and with it, the weight of responsibility shifted onto his shoulders. Caleb stood at the pen's edge, his pulse still racing from the rancher's tentative acceptance of change. That shift in attitude had provided him with a flicker of hope, but a new storm brewed within. Standing there, he could feel the weight of expectation pressing against him, a tangible reminder of the commitment he had just invited them into. The sows remained unbothered, yet he recognized they were only part of a larger narrative unfolding, one that could either elevate him to a new realm of authority or thrust him into deeper self-doubt. The days that followed were rife with newfound energy. Caleb worked alongside the ranchers who had shown interest, eager to cultivate a sense of community around the breeding techniques they were trying. Every morning he awoke with a surge of purpose, his dreams now woven with images of thriving livestock and harmonious relationships. And yet, with every passing day, doubts lingered in the corners of his mind, whispering of possible failure and confrontation with skeptical long-time ranchers. As they delved into the practicalities, Caleb found himself teaching. His initial nervousness faded as he realized he possessed knowledge the others were eager to absorb. It was during one of these teaching moments, explaining the intricacies of genetic inheritance in livestock, that he stumbled upon a hidden talent, a knack for breaking down complex ideas into relatable concepts. The ranchers responded well. Their laughter and thoughtful questions opened channels of engagement he hadn't anticipated. It was here, among them, that he discovered a growing confidence in his leadership. As they unwrapped the layers of this new endeavor together, he found himself embodying a role he had only dreamt of assuming, a guide. But with this new capability emerged a gnawing realization. With visibility came vulnerability. One afternoon, a setback rattled the budding optimism. A sudden illness swept through the pen, impacting a couple of the sows. Caleb's heart dropped at the sight of their distress. He felt not just the weight of their suffering, but an oppressive fear for the responsibility he had taken on. Would the ranchers see this as a failure on his part? Anxiety gripped him tightly, stifling the encouraging thoughts he had nurtured. In the following days, close scrutiny at the ranch only intensified. Old Man Harold's frown remained constant, hovering like a specter. He had made it clear that he expected tangible evidence of success, a demand that now bore down heavily on Caleb. Confronted with the potential skepticism of his peers, he found his resolve tested. Conjuring up the energy he had cultivated, he dove back into the realities of livestock management, employing new treatments to combat the illness. During this trying period, he had his first direct confrontation with Harold. They stood in the barn, the musty scent wrapping around them as Harold's tone turned accusatory. "You claim you have answers, young Caleb, but there's nothing but doubt in this barn." Caleb met his gaze, a mixture of frustration and determination igniting within him. "Every venture worth taking involves risk, Mr. Harrell. What we are attempting here is no different. If we stick to old ways without question, we'll stagnate. I'm asking you to trust me just a little longer." In that moment of direct conflict, Caleb felt the fire of leadership flicker within him. He realized he wasn't backing down. His words were born from genuine belief, not statistical claims. That insight made him feel solid, a new resolve kindling in the face of doubt. Yet just as he felt secure in that burgeoning identity, uncertainty loomed. Would what he proposed translate into lasting change? While he felt the stirrings of confidence, whispers of internal doubt resurfaced. Could he navigate the deeper complexities of guiding these ranchers toward trust, testing their collective fears as they embraced uncertainty? As the illness began to subside and the first signs of recovery emerged, Caleb felt a fragile hope weave through the ranks of his feelings. Yet he remained acutely aware of the looming challenges that awaited even outside the pen. And amid this evolution, he was left with one pressing thought. Could he maintain momentum in the face of inevitable trials, or would his untested resolve falter when it mattered most? As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting elongated shadows over the ranch, Caleb stood resolutely, conscious of the crux he now faced. The crucial moment on the horizon where both personal and professional development threatened to collide with his deepest insecurities. How could he cheat the doubt that threatened to overshadow progress? Would he have the courage to confront the looming uncertainties head-on? Caleb stood at the center of Whispering Pines Ranch, the golden hues of sunset casting a warm glow on the land he had fought valiantly to preserve. The previous months had been an odyssey of self-discovery and communal forging. Every doubt, setback, and triumph had pushed him to redefine not only his vision of ranching, but his very sense of self. With a palpable weight lifted from his shoulders, he reflected on how far he had come. No longer the overwhelmed rancher, he now embodied the role of a confident leader, having effectively bridged modern innovations with cherished traditions. The livestock, once frail with illness, thrived. His careful management had returned them to health, invigorating the rancher's hope. Each small victory felt monumental, nurturing a belief that change was not merely possible but essential. As the ranchers flocked to him with questions, skepticism fading, Caleb felt a surge of pride. He had transformed the workshop series into a vibrant community of practice, a space where ideas flowed freely and collaboration brewed. When one rancher successfully implemented a new approach to herd management, the excitement was electric. He had proven that innovation required not just vision, but also communal support. It was during a particularly animated discussion, the urgency of collective action resonated deeply within him. Disagreements had solidified friendships. The fires of skepticism had forged camaraderie. Seeing ranchers who had once doubted him now rallying behind these innovations was vital affirmation of his journey. He had actively engaged with the skeptics, and in doing so, he had reshaped not only their views, but also the landscape of traditional ranching itself. Caleb's transformation echoed through the community. Old Man Harrell, once a fierce critic, now offered insights steeped in experience. Their debates had shifted from opposition to strategic collaboration. "What you've created here, Caleb," Harrell remarked one day, respect emanating from his voice, "is more than a sustainable ranch. It's a movement rooted in unity." With regard and recognition from peers no longer tinged with condescension but marked by admiration, Caleb took a moment to savor this achievement. He was not merely salvaging the ranch, he was breathing life into a legacy that melded tradition with progress. The culminating event of the summer drew near, a community showcase where ranchers would present the results of their experiments. Caleb stood before a gathered crowd, adrenaline coursing through him as he prepared to speak. The ranchers shared their newfound techniques, each story a testament to their collective evolution. As applause filled the air, Caleb felt the gravity of what they had achieved together wash over him. This wasn't merely about cattle anymore. It represented a generational fortification of values merged with forward-thinking resolve. As he stepped up to the podium, he glanced across the faces of friends and competitors. These were stakeholders in their shared future. What has emerged here is not just a set of practices, it is our legacy in action. Together, we have proven that adapting does not mean abandoning our roots, but rather nurturing them, he proclaimed, voice steady and clear. He could feel every eye upon him. Their anticipation mirrored his own excitement. And when he finished, the applause thundered, an acknowledgement not just of his speech, but of collective growth. Each clap resonated with the whispers of courage that had nurtured his resolve. He had transitioned from the boy plagued by self-doubt to a figure of competence and trust within his community. As he immersed himself in the celebrations, the past shadows of doubt fell away like autumn leaves, and a sense of accomplishment enveloped him. The resolve he once struggled to summon now radiated from him. The true test had been met. Resilience triumphed over fear, proving that he could not just envision a better future for the ranch, but make it tangible as well. Caleb recognized his journey as a deeply personal evolution, a reclamation of his identity that intertwined purpose with tradition. Now, as he gazed at the horizon, a tapestry of new beginnings painted against the fading light, he understood one fundamental truth. He was the author of his own narrative, a skilled rancher and a leader of innovation. This was the moment he had conquered not just the challenges before him, but the doubts within him. And with that peace, he vowed to continue nurturing both the land and the community that raised him. The journey was far from over, but with trust earned and obstacles embraced, Caleb knew he could face whatever lay ahead. An embrace of both the trials of today and the promise of tomorrow. If you resonate with Caleb's incredible transformation and are eager to witness more inspiring journeys of personal and professional growth, you need to subscribe immediately. This is the moment to show your support and ensure you never miss these exclusive emotional stories again. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread hope to more people just like Caleb. We want to hear from you. Comment your thoughts and theories about the ending below. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this uplifting conclusion.